Hi there, my name is Irene Sterian. I'm founder, president, and CEO of the ReMAP network, as well as I'm director of technology and innovation at Celestica.
What is the relationship between intrapreneurship and innovation?
I think the two are very similar in that entrepreneurship relates to a person and how they behave, and innovation actually relates to a company and how they behave. So I think entrepreneurship is needed for a company's innovation ecosystem, and you need people to do that. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have three rules for myself. I start small, I think big, and I create value. And I think right now, because of COVID-19, there's an increase in digital transformation, and there's an increase in automation and remote work, online presence, and all that requires innovation. And it's really the individuals within that company that do that. Unfortunately, a lot of times there's a department of innovation, or there's a group which is in a silo in a company like a skunk works, and that's where innovation happens. And that really is not the way. It has to be permeated throughout the company. And it has to be really one person at a time. And I think right now we're dealing with two crises from a company point of view. One is the healthcare crisis, which is the safety and security of employees. There's a pandemic, there's a second wave, and now the population is different than the first wave. And then there's the economic crisis, which the business has to look at what are their markets, what are their supply chains, and what's the uncertainty. And I think entrepreneurs can help in both. I've seen in terms of the healthcare crisis, how a company have pivoted into healthcare markets like ventilators, PPE. And then I've seen also how, from an economic crisis point of view, entrepreneurs have helped with digitizing. So they've created for a company online services, or they expanded platforms instead of just hardware to do software and AI. Supply chain in particular, from a manufacturing point of view, has been really disrupted, and looking at local networks. But I think if a company did not have an innovation network before this, it has been forced to get one. And I think entrepreneurs or people that were already in the company were the ones to create it.
So by now, the benefits of intrapreneurship to an organization are pretty obvious. You've made that very clear. Are there any risks? Are there any disadvantages to an organization? I'm thinking maybe having people that take the lead, and if everyone tries to take the lead, could it pose any issues for the management?
Yeah. Well, I think the benefits far outweigh the risks, and I'm not biased at all in this whatsoever. But I think entrepreneurs really offer something different for a company that, in terms of how they hire people, even they bring diversity. So entrepreneurs overall really like high risk and have high risk tolerance, whereas companies don't. They have low risk tolerance. So that could be some of the risks, and it's risk for both multinational and SMEs. And I would find SMEs are even more conservative than MNEs. They use lateral innovation. So they come from one market and borrow to another market. And the company may see this as maybe not focused thinking and kind of divergent thinking. Entrepreneurs are also big picture thinkers, and the company almost has an allergic reaction to this because they need metrics and they need quarterly results. And they're always at odds with, well, what have you made this quarter, or what's the result of this quarter? And entrepreneurs take big risks for big rewards, whereas companies overall are conservative. They need to report to a board of directors and to their results. And I mentioned earlier that they're good change agents, whereas companies don't like to change. They like to stay the status quo. And in the current environment with COVID-19, you can't stay the status quo because everything around you is changing. So I think that's why entrepreneurs are a good fit right now. I'd say they're flexible, they're adaptable. They don't need processes, routines, or standards, whereas the companies do. So they're good transformational leaders in a case like now where we're in COVID-19 state and we're going from a plateau of routine to something new, to a new plateau. But then when you're in a steady state of operations, they're not good leaders in that. They're good transformational leaders. So I think there has to be a balance between entrepreneurship activities and day-to-day operations in the company. I'm personally an entrepreneur, and I would never want to run operations because I know my strengths and weaknesses. So I think at a company level, the company needs to know when to, allow people to lead in different ways.
Is there a methodology, some kind of a system to, I suppose, transition from a traditional company culture to a more intrapreneurial one?
I work with a few companies, and maybe I'll start with a small history lesson and then go from there. But the original sort of entrepreneurship started by being called skunkworks. And I worked for IBM, and that's what it was called. And I believe Lockheed Martin actually invented the name skunkworks back in 1943 when they were doing the P-80 fighter jet. And that was for the war. So it had to be secretive and it had to be part of the war effort. But this was a separate team, and they had their leader, I believe, Kelly Johnson, had Kelly's 14 Rules of Entrepreneurship, which was really cool because they could procure their own parts, they could do their own research, and they could also sell to their own customers. It's almost like a separate division, and it's almost like they operated like a startup. And IBM did something similar with the PC. To me, what I didn't like is it's called skunkworks. And it has a negative connotation in that, there's people in this building and nobody else knows what they do. And sometimes they come out and, we'll find out a year from now what happened. And I think when Apple started and Steve Jobs kind of fast forward 40 years, 1985, he took a group of people and he took them into a garage. And that's kind of a big company now acting entrepreneurial. And even some innovation hubs today call themselves garages because that was sort of the next word for entrepreneurship. You go into a garage, so you have space at a college or university to do your work, and you're kind of more entrepreneurial because you're outside the walls of the company. And I think Communitech is very good at that, and they have some very large brand name companies in their Kitchener-Waterloo incubator, which are acting like that. But then I worked with Google and Google X in particular, and I really like their model in that first they have a formal Google X division where they have moonshot ideas, and they allow their employees to work on these moonshot ideas and really pursue them and put a lot of effort and structure into them. But then they also have these 20% of your time to pursue projects of your choice for all employees, which is, again, a bit more of an ad hoc serendipity type of way of doing it. So they're doing it in two ways. And I thought both of them are very interesting and very creative in terms of what they were able to accomplish. I think all of those examples, though, have a problem in that they're all multinational companies. And then I thought about SMEs, and I couldn't think of one specific example like that for SMEs. I think we sort of have an image problem in terms of entrepreneurship and SMEs. So SMEs actually have a benefit because they're a smaller organization, which allows them to be faster. But the negative is they don't have as much funds and resources to support entrepreneurs. So I guess in terms of my recommendations of suggestion to foster entrepreneurship, there's probably 4 things. First of all, to allow failure and to learn from failure and to celebrate failure. The second thing is to allow this big risk and big reward, allow experimentation, and try things until you're successful. Third, I would say you need more than a person or a department of innovation, and you need more than a skunkworks on the periphery. You need to be part of the culture and part of the infrastructure at all levels. And just like you have continuous improvement, you should have continuous innovation. So skunkworks is not continuous. And I would say last but not least, back to education and training.
I was going to ask you about the role of key stakeholders in fostering an intrapreneurial culture at the Canada level. Who would you say has to be in the lead?
From a government point of view, they can have a huge influence because we are a large nation, geographically separated nation. of companies, as well as we are a small SME population. We have 55,000 manufacturing companies across Canada. And so we're not, I would say, driven by a few multinationals. It's mostly small companies. So to try to create a change through industry organization, it's very much like a patchwork. So I would say from a government point of view, I would go to the federal government to, I would say, be more cohesive and to be more inclusive of all regions. And I think of entrepreneurship really as an individual, not a company. So how can you do change management at the individual level? And I would say today we're in a continuous learning mode. So I would look at, first of all, the learning, like continuous learning, and teaching everyone about tech, because I think there seems to be a negative connotation, like tech is a four-letter word. But there's hardware, there's software, there's AI, and Canada has strengths in all those areas. And just teaching more people about it and how to leverage it, whether you have a background of tech or not, it doesn't matter. And then the other thing right now is we have understanding an economy that's impacted by COVID-19. So we need to understand that, but also I think we need to address the healthcare crisis and a new way of working. And I've seen a shift between the physical shift of coming into the factory versus the digital shift where you're working from home. And there's going to be new rules and responsibilities, especially for people that are on the gray zone right now, which maybe have to go into the office or maybe they can work from home. And then lastly, I would say pivoting. So experimenting, failing often, failing fast. Being an entrepreneur myself right now, I'd say this is the time to try things without fear of failure. But it's very hard to do that at the small company level. So how to organize or how to incent people to do things. And I think the government actually has done an amazing job of quickly looking at PPE and healthcare, and then pivoting towards certain programs in that and trying to support them. But I think right now people are in a bit of exhaustion from doing proposals and they like to actually do something. So even if it's a small thing, I think Digital Main Street, which is a program in Ontario that helps digitize companies, is good. It teaches them how to have an online presence. But I think we need to do more there. And I think teaching entrepreneurship and teaching how to find the next big thing, or how to say reality is we are going to have to change and there will be a next big thing. I think that's an entrepreneurial mindset.
So, if you were standing in front of, let's say the prime minister or the government or the youth or manufacturers, any group or any individual with influence on the Canadian economy, who would you choose to pitch? And what would you say to urge them to, foster a culture of entrepreneurship in Canada?
I picked two people actually. I picked the Honorable Mary Ng. She's the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. And I also picked the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, because I think both of them relate to the comments I have around small business and innovation. And actually, Minister Ng just came out with a State of Trade report a couple of months ago. And I think she said that no sector of the Canadian economy has been immune to the global supply chain disruption. And I think that's a big thing in terms of how we make products, how we design products, and how we build products. And I think I was inspired by that in terms of making a pitch to them. So here's my pitch. SMEs make up 99% of all Canadian companies, 90% of all jobs in Canada, and 85% of all new jobs in Canada. But there's an entrepreneurship gap in SMEs. We have very strong academic, startup, and entrepreneur ecosystems. We have great research ideas in Canada, but we need to translate them into economic benefit. And SMEs are the engine of that transformation. We need to educate them, and government needs to give them the benefits that multinational companies have, the resources and the talent for them to be able to take greater risk, understand the tech and business opportunities, pivot into new sectors, export to new markets, create local resilient supply chains, and innovate without fear of failure.